technologies and new ways of working were disrupting jobs and the skills that employees need. The unprecedented global crisis made this need more urgent to help young people develop resilience to face the challenges of employment and entrepreneurship. In an endeavor to bridge the gap between skilling and employment by providing training to the youth in high-quality skills, National Skill Development Corporation and Generation India Foundation have collaborated to launch Project Amber, Accelerated Mission for Better Employment and Retention. The initiative aims to develop and implement a scalable and sustainable model of skill development that supports inclusive growth to ensure better outcomes and institutional strengthening to empower India's youth with the right knowledge and vocational skills.
I'm your hostess for the day, Ladima and Untitled. And often we have heard the words skilling, reskilling, upskilling, often by our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji. If we call him the brand ambassador of Skill India Mission, it wouldn't be wrong. And the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship has played a huge role in implementing the Skill India Mission. And as we all know, the Finance Minister, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, in her last two budget speeches, emphasized the role of PPPs, the public-private partnership model, to be pushed forward by the government to implement various projects. Here we are as a part of the PPP model and working together to be a part of the great India growth story. We know we are doing so well, our economy is doing so well as compared to other countries post-COVID also.
So first of all, good morning everybody. Thank you so much for sparing your time to be here as part of the launch for Amber. This is a prestigious moment for us, and we are really grateful that you are sharing this moment with us. I would particularly like to welcome and thank Mr. Rajesh Agarwalji for sparing your time, Secretary, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, to be here. Thank you so much, sir, for your presence. Mr. Ved Tiwari, thank you, sir, for sparing your time and being here. The outcome that we are trying to achieve, which is it is an accelerated mission for better employment and retention. The focus is entirely being able to sort of shift the skilling orientation from inputs to outcomes, and that's very important and key to the project. The objective is to train 30,000 learners, 50% of which will be women, across several job roles using Generation 7-step methodology. And again, by way of outcomes, there are two that I would like to highlight. As you can see, the first is placements. That we want to improve placement outcomes to about 65% in year one, and sort of increase it to about 70% in year two. And then retention outcomes at 60% for 3 months and about 50% at 6 months. As you would know, that currently retention is not so actively measured, but here outcomes are being paid. The payouts are actually based on both placements as well as retention, so that's very important. NSTC is a not-for-profit public limited company incorporated in 2008. And it was set up, I think that's very important, by the Ministry of Finance as a public-private partnership, which is really, the sort of the theme here, in as far as at least what we talk about Amber as well. And that it is 49% shared by NSTC, and the balance comes actually from share capital. It is a privilege for Generation to be working with an institution such as NSTC, which is clearly the flagship organization in as far as skill development in the country is concerned. Like I said, I will not spend too much time on that. I would like to introduce you a bit about Generation. So Generation is a global organization. We work in 16 countries. We were established in 2015. And the primary objective of Generation is to be able to provide employability skills to youth across the world, into jobs and sectors that will be resilient post-COVID, because it's a very different world that we are going to face. We already are facing a very different world. And then I think the second first that we are very proud of is the fact that we've shifted learning to blended and online. This is a first in the sense by the kind of scale that we are offering, and this is not just a reaction to the pandemic. It is, but then going forward, we want to be able to institutionalize that how do you get training to happen in an online or blended format. And that by itself is a huge sort of systems change, as all of you will acknowledge. We create SOPs which will ensure that the generation's methodology is being implemented. And then I will not sort of focus on the others. I have spoken on mentoring and the placement focus that we have. But last, which is on the monitoring and evaluation, which is very important. So this isn't just about 30,000 learners that we are training. We are ensuring that we have a third-party agency which will do the evaluation, which will try and understand what were the processes that were followed and were they successful or not. And this is being done by Mathematica, which is one of the most sort of renowned research and evaluation agencies globally. So, the entire learnings are going to come through the effort that we are going to do with Mathematica. So that's the process that we are following. Very quickly on the job roles that we are focusing on. Again, won't get into the details of this, but then these are the job roles, as you can see. So we conducted a study, we tried to understand what are the job roles that will be resilient in the post-COVID world, and found, of course, that the healthcare sector is one, retail is one. We know that the hospitality sector hasn't sort of bounced back, but then it has been amongst the largest employers, and it will ultimately, sort of come back and bounce back. And it is a key sector to sort of focus on, even if not immediately. We will talk about this in more detail as we move along, and also especially with the panel. But there's a couple of things that I would like to highlight. We start with jobs. B, we ensure that there's behaviors and mindsets in the work that we do, and then we provide mentorship support to our learners, which is very important because we know that our learners come from backgrounds where they lose their social support once they get into training programs and in jobs. So we have clinical psychologists who support our learners for 4 months, 2 months into the training and 2 months into the job. So there is a whole, a plethora of initiatives that we take across the cycle from training or pre-training, at the time of training and post-training, which sort of defines the 7-step methodology. So we are already at 71 batches that have been in training. Some of the learners are from here. You will get a chance to interact with them. Approximately about 2,000 learners are in classrooms as we speak, in 41 centers and being trained through 6 training partners. So that's the quick update, and thank you so much once again.
Please, IT Secretary Sharma sir, कि राजेश तुम्हारा डिजिलॉकर चुरा लूं? मैंने कहा सर मोस्ट वेलकम। मैं अपना महाराष्ट्र का लोगो हटा के भारत का लोगो लगा के उनको वोट दे दिया। उनका बाप चलाइए। तो मेरी एक रिक्वेस्ट वही जनरेशन से, आई वाज सीइंग थ्रू दिस थिंग, आपका मेंटरिंग ऐप और टीचर ट्रेनिंग टॉश है, वो हम चुरा लेंगे एज इट ओपन सोर्स। You can give it out of philanthropy for further scale up and experimentation beyond the summer project. So good elements we should pick up, do pilots, and then scale up on whatever business model comes around. So we see that. So I was talking outside during tea time, and there is an industry or potential employer connect also. So that's a good part. And also, before coming here 2 months ago, I was finance advisor in petroleum and corporate affairs. So from that angle also, I'm happy that government is spending less than the common cost norms, and industry and philanthropic money is pitching in. So skill training over the years has dramatically changed. The requirements have changed. So when we became independent, we were absolutely decimated nation. From having 20-30% of world GDP 500 years ago. So the slavery over 400 years basically decimated the country. We came down to practically little exports, very little local manufacturing and so on. So after independence, if we go through the parliament debates, there was need of rebuilding the country, rebuilding the road networks, the power sector. Basically, we were an unelectrified nation at that time. Dams, so steel plants, so basically everything. So we built IITs and ITIs, both, in government sector to start with. So IITs for engineers, ITIs for technicians. Then we come to ATs, and in the meanwhile, only training skill sector basically did not attract private investments. Education sector did, schools and colleges. For delaying this, unfortunately, I had practically 3 dozen parliament questions, and I was taking a quick review of that. So then in 80s, we had the IT boom, so Infosys and others came. In 90s, you could find IT coaching centers in every street by different names, and thanks to that we became from $0 export to $1 billion exports to $100 billion exports today. So that sector has flourished. So economy got liberalized, new kind of jobs came. 2010, NSDC was set up in Finance Ministry. Sector skill councils came. So skilling sector bloomed from manufacturing sector alone to 30 plus odd sector skill councils and lot of new job roles. And I'm very happy that today also we see multiple job roles, multiple sector skill councils getting involved. Then again in last 10 years, ITI saw private investments. So now we have much lesser number of government ITIs than private ITIs. Though students are roughly equal, because government ITIs are bigger and usually they have 2.5 times the strength of a private IT on an average. And we see a lot of now employers also putting their skin in the game. Now today if a company or an industry, three methods. One is कि आप apprentice लेके उसको सिखाइए, या ट्रेनिंग सेंटर में हाथ मिलाइए फॉर ड्यूअल ट्रेनिंग, या फिर आप उसको ले लीजिए 20,000 रुपीज पे 40,000 पे 2 लाख रुपीज whatever is the joining cost, and 6 महीने उसको सिखाइए, या उसको प्रोडक्टिविटी बिल्डअप करिए from 10% in first month to 20% in second month and so on. So multiple studies by CII and others have shown that that's not effective. If a company just plucks a student from the system, a fresher, gives them the minimum salaries, then the productivity drop in first 6 months, the costing it has, it is much more than the taking as an apprentice cost or shaking hands with the training centers. So that's why in ITIs we are telling everyone to have dual system of training. That in 1 year or 2 years, children should spend 20%, 40%, even maybe 60, 80% time on a person in a pantaloons or anywhere. So that's the industry connect we need. In PMKVI, we don't really have built that in at the moment. Though we have sector skill councils with all the industry top shots, so the job roles and curriculums have sort of become more oriented towards the requirement, but the real handshake is not there at the training time. That's what is lacking. So now we see a happy situation where Samsung has already spent upwards of hundreds of crores, actually refurbished the labs and even give teachers in lots of ITIs. Same with Tata, same with Maruti, same with many others. And now even for employability skills, philanthropic money has started flowing in. So we have even skill impact bonds and so on. So the realization all around is there in the industry that basically for a win-win situation, you have to get involved at the training stage also. So I'm very happy that this project basically is a combination of lot of factors. So generation has come in with that industry connect, with that plus model of PMKVY that we are trying with that 7 steps thing.
In which case the government puts in the PMK figure, the CSR component comes from us. So we need to look at funding in that sense, so it becomes outcome based. In terms of, again, the other mindset was the government has done much of the heavy lifting in this space. If you see, much of the funding has come from the government, both in terms of the training programs, capacity creation. So we also wanted to see how do we bring in the private sector, and private sector doesn't come in just like that. You need to create products, structures, etc., through which they can come. And the last 2-3 years we have been working on, NSDC has been working on such products.
Bold, I would say, and little more, you should have less apprehension regarding government. Under the leadership of our news secretary, who was earlier DGT also, I think we are very positive. We are very encouraging private sector to come forward, to give us ideas, to come for the collaboration. It should not be that you need to give us ideas of only training. You can try anything in this world. We can work together, and I think in this you all need to come forward. We can have trainers from the big private sectors, like in automotive sector, if I can say, there are many big companies. Toyota is there, Maruti is there. They must be having a lot of good people who are having on-job training, and they can train our people very well. So I would say you start some ideas and we will follow you. That why don't you create a good set of people, impanel set of trainers and assessors in different sectors. So I think that is the second thing for the quality thing. And in quality aspect, I would like to stress upon one more thing, that quality is not going to be improved unless and until we will make a skill aspirational. Though since the beginning of this ministry, we have been trying this thing that we will have to make a skill aspirational, but how we are going to make it aspirational? This is a major question. Not so. See, definitely in the skilling sector, if we will not be able to, we are getting the kind of students who are actually being labeled as failed in in our regular traditional kind of education system. And we know that in our ITIs and in our PMKVY and in our other short-term skilling system, we are getting the kind of students who are not being accepted or not being recognized in our regular traditional kind of schooling system. So I think we will have to start from there. From school system, we need to first create this kind of confidence, and I think the responsibility lies more on us. More on us means more on the government, that we need to bridge that kind of gap, that we need to inculcate or maybe create that concept that no, if the person is good in carpentry, or if I am good in laying my hands on cooking or this thing, then I should not be labeled. And I may not be good in mathematics, I may not be good in physics, I may not be good in history. But if I am good in if I have dexterity, if I have some skills which I can do, then I should be equally respected. And this we have seen in other countries. I could get an opportunity to visit Finland and Korea during my this tenure, and I have seen there they do not mind if the class 8th student is not good in mathematics, but he is good in carpentry, he is good in electronics. But this is not the case in our country. So I think the second part on which we need to work a lot on that in the government, within the government, and definitely we will need your cooperation, because definitely higher wages is one of the things which can directly collaborate. If you are still paying, a doctor is equally paid as carpenter, then definitely carpenter is going to be an aspirational job. So I think this is the most difficult part which we are trying to address since last 7-8 years.
So if a person has to get into a job and be successful, what is the social support and community support you're providing across is going to become extremely crucial. It can't be just that classroom training is going to make a person equipped. So I think that's another set of learning, and all of this has to be viewed with two lenses, right? One is really having an outcome orientation. I heard that from Dr. Sinha as well, that everything has to have that outcome orientation to say, what is it that we are ultimately aiming for? Is it employment? One is employment, but then there is also retention within employment. So how long are learners actually staying in the job is also going to be equally important to see. And I'm glad to see that Amber is designed and defined in such a way that it is not just about training a certain set of learners, but also having a real outcome to say this is what we want to achieve from that in terms of placement, in terms of retention, etc. So that is equally important. And all of this in a very easy manner. And I'm certainly going to take your request, Secretary Agarwal, to the board on the technology pieces, because as we are building this technology, how do we ensure that this becomes more and more scalable? So all of this, having that technology backbone to be able to track. So for example, in the methodology, we have 100 plus metrics that a learner actually tracks on every single learner. And a learner gets tracked over a year after they even graduate from a program, so that the success is sustainable. So these are some of the things that we have learned across all countries and have sort of built it into the program. and very, very excited to be in the launch and to ensure that this success happens. Firstly, I'm so glad and happy to be in this place, right? Because I think this is something that generation had dreamed of almost many, many years ago when it was started, and to be able to have a partnership with NSDC under the aegis of the ministry is actually a great thing. So I think with that, it's gratitude first is what I'm feeling. With that, let me talk a little bit about generation. I think the idea really was, this is not an academic sort of a methodology, right? It was actually built bottoms up based on a lot of experiments and innovations that were supported by many, many partners across many countries, right? So, and in India as well. So Generation started in India way back in 2015 as an experiment, and then where we are today. So there are several learnings that got built into the methodology, right? So the first thing, and it was very heartening to hear that throughout the, all the conversations that we have had today, because the first learning that we had is the entire skilling ecosystem has to be employer-backed. It has to become about jobs, and that's what generation methodology is also about. And it's really about bringing people to jobs, which means making them really relevant for those job skills. So one of the big things that the methodology drives is the ability to be able to understand what a job really requires, what are the breakpoints in those jobs, and catering through that through skilling. Because if a person is skilled and not employable, then the whole actually system breaks down. So the first and foremost learning that I would leave everyone with is that it has to be demand-backed, it has to be employer-backed. So that's number one.
As you know, as you're saying, we have been doing the skilling program almost now 16 years. We were the first ones to have created job-linked, placement-linked training program way back in 2006. And then the model was scaled up in several formats, and we helped Generation and the previous avatar of Generation was McKinsey Social Initiative in designing this kind of program and several others. Reason why I'm happy is that for the first time, we're actually talking about convergence in real sense. And many of us have been talking about how do we bring in this convergence. There were days in training centers, if a government-sponsored program, even now, government-sponsored training program, that batch has to be separately maintained. And if there is any corporate-sponsored program, it has to be separate. In fact, there were even instances where buildings need to be separate, because the apprehension of the government was that whether there is a double counting, whether the same guy is being trained under corporate-sponsored program, and same guy is being trained under this the government program. But for the first time, I think they both have been brought together on the and then the objectives have been aligned. Whether it is PMKVY, DDoJKY, any of the government programs, the end objective is the same which Generation seeks to achieve in terms of placement and retention. You need a lot of other things that need to be done. So that came in additional layer. And the PMKVY, it's not just about PMKVY here in terms of funding, which is being converted, what we need to see. It is not just the money being given as per the normal PMKVY common cost norms, but what is being converged is the entire expertise resources of NSDC's ecosystem, which is under the ministry. Same PMKKs which were created and they are being leveraged. The training is being done by the training partners who have been selected through a very high quality screening process. The credible ones have been brought in. Their expertise was brought in. Then over that the PMKVY whatever funding. Then the rest is the additional capital coming in. So it's a beautiful convergence of the training providers, which I call it a private sector, and the philanthropy or in the impact bonds, which in our venture capital also coming in, and the government. The multiplier factor is significant. I think it will be very interesting to actually study after 6 months, maybe after 1 year, the youth retain the jobs, their earnings, 1, 2, 3, 4, their career progression, vis-a-vis a standalone program being done, either as a CSR, pure CSR sponsored, or a pure government sponsored.
Digital rails and digital commons, we look at all of our problems, all the frictions in the ecosystem. It can actually boil down to 3 things. One is we lack trust, in the sense a trainee does not trust a training center, employer does not trust the trainee certificates, lack of trust. Similarly, the way to pay, finance systems. And third is people are not discoverable. In the sense, I am a trainee, I don't know which is the nearest training center. So we are trying to put all these elements, trust, payment, discovery, etc., into what we are calling as digital commerce. Very good product with CSR coming on. The way we are describing, 1:1, 1 rupee coming from the government, 1 rupee coming from CSR. The third product which the NSDC team is working on is skill to employability fund, where we're investing in funds, which are investing in skill tech kind of products. So that's the most mature part of the market. So we are creating a range of products, and as Priya mentioned, a spectrum of financing possibilities, right from grant, return of grant, impact bonds, skill loans. That's the other thing, and that's where the ministry is also very supportive. They're talking of providing guarantee so that the student can pick up loans. So therefore, this is a very exciting space, the financing piece. And coming to the technology piece, that's even more exciting in the sense. When we talk of technology, when we speak of our ecosystem, I think all of us will agree it's quite large, it's so heterogeneous, so divergent, and it's broken in various parts, And if you try to run such a system, operate such ecosystem, it's it's a very difficult job. And the only way it could be solved in some way is how do we bring in technology in it. And that's where I think Ved, the secretary, me, etc., we are also working on what we are calling as a digital commons. And I'll just briefly speak about it through an analogy. We all know about Uber, we all know about Swiggy, and we all know these applications really support, bring value to all of in our lives. But do you know about the fundamental technologies below Uber, below this Swiggy, etc.? If you look at Uber, it runs on Google Maps. If you look at Google Maps, they actually run on the GPS ecosystem, which Bill Clinton in those days, he actually opened it up for the civilian use.
सरकार का काम है नीतियां बनाना, हमारा काम है उन नीतियों पे डिलीवरी करना। किनके लिए? बच्चों के लिए जो हमारे सामने बैठे हैं। मैं एक बात ये कह सकता हूँ, सारे लोग जो ऑनलाइन भी हैं, सरकार बहुत इनोवेटिवली सोच रही है, कोई भी रास्ता तय करने को तैयार है और कुछ भी करने को तैयार है, लेकिन उसको हमारा कमिटमेंट चाहिए। और हमारा कमिटमेंट का मतलब कि हमको ये दिखाना है कि हम कमिटेड हैं। हमारी कमिटमेंट तब आएगी जब एम्प्लॉयर हमारे कैंडिडेट को एक्सेप्ट करेगा। एम्प्लॉयर तब एक्सेप्ट करेगा जब हमारा क्वालिटी ऑफ ट्रेनिंग बहुत अच्छा होगा, और जब वो होगा तो सारी दुनिया कंट्रीब्यूट करेगी। Everything possible. We are not perfect. We will have our flaws, but we are prepared to walk the distance that you want us to walk. And that's much. I'm making a promise on behalf of everybody who is connected with the skill ecosystem that we will walk that extra distance to make the future for these children and make India great again. Thank you so much.
We should initiate some project, and I think Amber, I would like to congratulate Amber also, because this is the first project where private sector has come forward and said, yes, we want to collaborate with Government of India. We will be putting in some money, and then you will also put in some efforts as well as some money, and then we will start some project. But before that, honestly, we have been trying a lot with the private sector, but the private sector, I don't know where this message has gone or missed, that we want a collaborative participation. It's not only about funds, it's about the sharing of capacities. It's not that India is not having capacity in the private sector. You guys are here, and I think many more are there across the country who have the capacity. But why there is some hesitancy in working with the government, it is really very difficult to understand. And under Sankalp, I think everybody, Arun was also a part of Sankalp earlier, and this whole team is here. We have tried to open all the boxes. We have put only 2 restrictions, that we will not create any brick and mortar structure, and we will not give funds for typical PMKVY kind of training. Other than this, whatever you want, you bring us the ideas, you come up with the solutions, and we are with you.
स्टेक होल्डर एक तो है नौकरी देने वाले, हमारी इंडस्ट्री जिसको ये जो 4-5 महीने मेगा ट्रेंड बनाए, हमारे पास प्रोबेबली एक लाइफ टाइम अपॉर्चुनिटी हिंदुस्तान के सामने कि देश दुनिया का नंबर 1 कंट्री बनके दिखा दे, क्योंकि ये जो 4-5 मेगा ट्रेंड हो रहे हैं उनमें हमारे पास डेमोग्राफिक एडवांटेज है। अगर हम अपने एम्प्लॉयर्स को सपोर्ट कर सके कि उनको राइट प्रोडक्टिविटी मिल सके, तो हमें दुनिया में कोई हमको रोक नहीं सकता। दूसरा है कि ये बच्चे जो आज अपनी नई जिंदगी में कदम रख रहे हैं, अगर हमने इनको नई सही दिशा दे दी तो आज दो दशक बाद का हिंदुस्तान एक बिल्कुल डिफरेंट हिंदुस्तान होगा।
डायरेक्ट एम्प्लॉयर कनेक्ट चाहिए। स्किल सिस्टम जो एम्प्लॉयर को एड्रेस नहीं करता वो अपना पर्पस सर्व नहीं करता।
My name is Anita Gupta. I am 22 years old. I live in Jaipur with my family and I have completed my BA. मैं रिटेल में आई हूँ। मेरी एक फ्रेंड थी, उन्होंने मुझे बताया कि रिटेल मतलब अम्बर का एक प्रोजेक्ट चल रहा है, वहाँ पर मुझे एक प्लेसमेंट मिल रहा है। तो मैंने उसके बारे में पहले रीड किया। रीड करने के बाद मुझे पता चला कि ये मेरे लिए बहुत ग्रेट अपॉर्चुनिटी है, बिकॉज मैं जॉबलेस थी। मेरी स्टडी कंप्लीट होने के बाद भी मैं 1 ईयर विदाउट जॉब ही थी। तो फिर मैं यहाँ पर आई। मुझे यहाँ पे हमारी ट्रेनर मनु मैम, उन्होंने बताया कि इसके बारे में पहले पूरी जानकारी दी उन्होंने हमें। तो उसके बाद हमारा टेस्ट लिया। टेस्ट में हम पास हो गए। उसके बाद उन्होंने हमारा जीत ब्यूरो करवाया। जीत ब्यूरो में हम लोग मॉल्स में गए। वहाँ पर हमें आरएसए का रोल बताया। आरएसए का रोल जिसमें वो कड़ी मेहनत करते हैं, 9 घंटे खड़े रहते हैं और वर्कआउट करते हैं बिना क्वेश्चन पुटअप किए कि सर हम 9 घंटे खड़े हैं, परेशान हो रहे हैं, बैठिए क्या, एनीथिंग। उन्होंने आगे बढ़े और फिर हमने वो चीज़ सीखी कि हाँ कि 9 घंटे। आज मुझे 15 दिन हो गए मेरे जॉब पे गए। 15 दिन में मैंने एहसास किया 9 घंटे खड़े रहना बहुत मुश्किल है। फिर भी लेट मी ट्राई। मैंने कोशिश की कि हाँ कि 9 घंटे खड़े रहना बहुत ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि कुछ खोने से कुछ मिलता है। हमें स्टडी में मैम ने बहुत कुछ पढ़ाया। फिर मुझे जॉब भी ऐसी जगह मिली कि मुझे बहुत बेनिफिट है। मैं आधे घंटे में आराम से पहुंच जाती हूँ और घर पे भी मैं आधे घंटे में आराम से चल जाती हूँ। मुझे आइनॉक्स में सेलिंग का काम मिला है। टिकट वगैरह चेक करना, कितनी सीटें बुक है, कितने लोगों में चल रही है, कैश काउंटर्स वगैरह चेक करने का काम है। मेरा एक्सपीरियंस है कि ये इतनी अच्छी अपॉर्चुनिटी मिली है, प्लीज़ कोई ना छोड़े। मैं चाहती हूँ।
I am living in Jaipur. During the corona period, my father shop close हो गई थी, तो मैंने इसलिए जॉब पर मतलब इसमें ज्वाइन करने का सोचा। और मेरे कज़न ने मेरे को इसके बारे में बताया था कि यहाँ पर प्लेसमेंट 100% गारंटी है, प्लेसमेंट मिलेगी। हम प्रोजेक्ट के बारे में बताया था। तो मैंने मेरी प्रॉब्लम ये थी कि मैं थोड़ा इंट्रोवर्ट टाइप का हूँ। मतलब मेरे से लोगों से मिलना ये मेरे को होता नहीं है मेरे से, तो मैं हेजिटेट कर जाता हूँ बहुत बार। तो मैंने इधर ज्वाइन किया। उसके बाद यहाँ पे टेस्ट हुए। टेस्ट होने के बाद 0 वीक पे गए, जिसमें उनको बताया कि क्या कि जॉब रोल क्या है, किस तरीके से काम किया जाता है, उसके बारे में बताया। उसके बाद फिर मॉक इंटरव्यू हुआ था, जिसमें जनरेशन से गोल्डी मैम ने लिया था मॉक इंटरव्यू। उसके बाद क्लासेस चली, जिसमें हमको बिहेवियर स्किल के बारे में, माइंडसेट के बारे में बताया गया। और ड्यूरिंग द 6 वीक मेरे जो मेरे इंट्रोवर्ट का प्रॉब्लम थी, जैसे मैं लोगों से इंटरेक्ट ना कर पाना, कि मेरी आफ्टर 6 वीक मेरी जब तक ज्वाइनिंग नहीं होता मेरी प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व हो गई है।
Lots of wishes. बहुत बढ़िया। Congratulations and all the best. Lots of blessings to you.
Excuse me.
Congratulations.
Excuse me. Thank you.
थैंक यू सर।
थोड़ा इधर हो जाओ। हाँ बस। क्या